Добрый вечер. Я в вашем распоряжении. Вначале только хотел бы сказать, что
I'm here for you. I wanted to say that we're grateful to the Kyrgyz leadership for organizing this work and for this year, throughout which Kyrgyzstan was chairing the CSTO and holding various events and activities. And I think this really helped bolster the
важный элемент
authority of the organization in these trying times.
и для России это важно, и
And
для многих стран
it is something that is really appreciated by Russia and by other states.
нам все без особых сложностей согласовали все
We had no difficulties in
решения,
coordinating
подписано, как вы знаете, практически
decisions made by the Secretariat. We didn't have
отчет, что в
any
современных условиях надо плотнее работать друг с другом.
differences on any of the aspects. Everyone agrees that we must work together. We're not
Отражение любых
threatening anyone, but we must be prepared to counter any actions
наших стран. Ну и много
that could be
направлений работы,
aggressive.
об этом еще поговорим.
And I believe that
Работа сложилась
will
практически
be able to discuss
важнейшим направлением. И,
for more of this work.
во-первых, констатируем результат. Вот, а во-вторых,
We've already achieved some
перспектива развития
results, and I
сотрудничества
believe that we've got good prospects
безопасности.
developing our cooperation at the CSTO. As you know,
ОДКБ
Russia is
будем это делать.
now
Приоритеты
presiding at the CSTO
в ходе
for the next year.
заседания.
I have laid out our priorities during the extended format meeting, and
В целом
I
мы
don't think I'll
высоко оцениваем результаты
need to repeat that.
совместно.
But on the whole, we
Наверняка не
appreciate the work
постараюсь не ответить.
that has been carried out. Now, if you have any questions, I'm ready to answer. Interfax. Now, a question about priorities. Could you tell us more about the slogan of your chairmanship, and what will your priorities be focused on? And also a question about the leader who declined to participate and who's holding joint exercises with the United States. Is there a threat to CSTO security? Well, as I've already mentioned, the priorities were outlined during my statement, and those are many. We will improve our cooperation, bolster our industrial manufacturing capacities. We've had a deep cooperation from the Soviet times. We're providing preferential treatment to those who are buying our weapons among CSTO countries, and it's very effective. Obviously, as the special military operation is underway, there are, of course, limited capabilities in certain respects. They are quite substantial, but we are prioritizing our own needs. So I don't mean to say that they're strained. We're still exporting equipment, first of all, aircraft, airplane and helicopters, and we did quite a lot. It was a bit of a revolution in terms of UAVs. We managed to achieve breakthroughs, and we're willing to share with our partners. Another important area is improving our governance, which may seem as a bureaucracy, but it's still important as every country wants to streamline the expenses and to make our cooperation more effective. We will continue to hold joint exercises in every sector, not only among the military, but also among our security services. Drug trafficking and organized crime are still threats that exist, and we intend to make use of everything that was prepared by our Kyrgyz colleagues. There will be a continuity of effort. As to the Armenian position, it is well known, our Armenian colleagues say that they support all the decisions made at the CSTO. They believe that they are fully fledged members of the CSTO, but they currently refrain from taking part in the meetings. That is their choice. What can we say? If they believe this is the best way right now, let it be. We are in constant contact as Russia and as the presiding country. We will, of course, be in close contact with Armenia as with the members of the CSTO. And the resolutions that we prepare and the decisions made will be coordinated with them. Bilateral relations with Kyrgyzstan include a lot of energy projects. Rosatom said this year that is willing to build a small-scale nuclear power plant in Kyrgyzstan. Was this discussed, and what do you believe are promising areas? And there's also another detail. There were recently some issues between Kazakhstan and Russia with cargo transit. Is there anything like that with Kyrgyzstan? Well, first of all, I'm very grateful to the President of Kyrgyzstan. I'm grateful for his invitation to make an official visit and for the attention and care that our delegation has seen here. And the relations have developed quite positively after the visit. And Russian companies are increasingly present in the Kyrgyz market. One of the reasons for that is that the current Kyrgyz leadership is able to ensure domestic political stability, which is always very important for potential investors. Because everyone hopes that the target country will be able to live up to the agreements. And the Kyrgyz leadership is excelling at this, and we wish them continued success. We wish them continued political stability, and as a member of the EU and the CSTO, they will receive our support and assistance. Our investment relations are thriving, and we also have cooperation in the mining sector and energy. Generally, Kyrgyzstan is receiving resources at minimum prices and with no customs duties, which makes our products very competitive in the Kyrgyz market, to say the least, and is very helpful for the Kyrgyz economy too. And it's not only oil and gas. We plan to build a nuclear power plants, the small-scale power plants that you mentioned. Russia is the only country in the world currently implementing such projects. There's a lot of talk from many, but we are the only ones who are actually doing it. Our colleagues from the relevant companies and agencies are constantly in touch about these projects. And we're also developing cooperation in other high-tech fields. Yandex is a company that has worked in Kyrgyzstan very actively, and I hope that this will continue. Yandex is not only food delivery and taxis, it's also one of the companies developing artificial intelligence. It's an extremely important sector which is now rapidly developing. It's important for all of us. Kyrgyzstan may not be a very big country, but it has a lot of very promising talent, young people with good education and skills. So it's very important for us to create a field here that will thrive and unlock its true potential. And of course, it's also very important for us to see that some migration policies align and that Russian citizens' rights are observed while promoting our economy, and so that the people of Kyrgyzstan who come to Russia are also prepared, that they have the requisite Russian language proficiency. And as you know, we have developed or assisted the Kyrgyz leadership in developing Russian language schools. We'll be opening more schools and we'll be working on higher education together. There's quite a lot of work planned. As you know, Russian is one of the official languages in Kyrgyzstan. So we are going to work in all of these areas. And as to the freight transportation that you mentioned, the issues that arose. At the EU, we have a cooperation between tax inspectorates, and there was a situation where some of the transport shipments were inspected on a case-by-case basis, and we found out that some of the transport is completely irregular, with no documentation. And of course, we have free movement, but every freight truck must have a set of documents, and it's not a big set of documents, but they must be available. You must have documents for your for the freight that you have and about the recipient. These are the formalities that must be observed, because these are the documents that give the grounds for calculation of duties and who should pay the value-added tax. So as soon as they started inspections, they found out that a lot of the traffic lacks documentation completely. It's just a black market. And the Russian Federation is under-receiving tens of billions of rubles for our budget. And of course, I briefed my colleagues. We had a conversation with President Tokayev of Kazakhstan. We had no issues about that. We had a conversation and we agreed that we will take steps to make sure that the trucks currently at the border will start moving into Russia as they should, and our customs authorities will be able to ascertain all the values and the duties. We will make sure that there are no lines, and it will be practically a green corridor. They will pay a minimum duty just to show that they're paying something. Starting from the next period, we will require a full set of documents. I hope that our tax bodies will agree on what to do with those who refuse to document their cargoes. A truck could have anything from TV sets to diamonds, but they could at least pay the duties for some boxes of shoes or something, so that we can get some kind of minimum from them. But there have already been thousands of trucks, and I hope that we'll sort this out until the end of the year. The Trump peace plan is the news. And how much does the originally published draft document include our interests, and did we receive a modified version? And when will Russia-US talks start? Because, as I understand, there have been no such talks. When will Steve Witkoff come to Russia, and what do you believe are the prospects for a peace settlement currently? Well, as to a draft agreement, there has been no draft. There was a set of issues, a list of issues to be discussed and to be deliberated and worked out. As I've already said, before my visit to Alaska, we discussed this with the United States and negotiating team. And after that, the list of possible items for an agreement was drafted, and it was conveyed to us through certain channels. Then there were talks in Geneva between the United States and the Ukrainian delegation. As I understand, they decided between themselves that these 28 items should be divided into 4 groups. And we received the outcomes of those discussions. In general, we agree that this may become the basis for a future agreement. It would not be proper for me to make any final statements right now, because there is no finalized material so far. And many of the things are very general in character at this point. But we see that the United States are considering our interests, including those that were voiced before the discussions in Anchorage. Some of the items will have to be discussed in very specific terms. We'll have to frame things diplomatically. It's one thing to say that Russia is not going to attack Europe, which is really laughable for us as an idea. Of course, we could write that down as this is, but sometimes people are a bit, and maybe they're a bit out of their minds, or maybe they're just trying to create some kind of an illusion for their populations when they say that Russia is preparing to attack and they need to strengthen their defense industry. Maybe they're just catering to the defense companies. Maybe they're trying to prop up their domestic political ratings, seeing the lamentable state of their economies. But in our eyes, of course, it's just nonsense. It's complete lies. But if those ideas are so hyped up in the Western public consciousness, if we truly need to make a statement that we don't have any aggressive plans, then we'd be willing to do this. Maybe there is a meaning in that. If we want to sit down all together and to have a discussion, to dot the I's about common European security, which we proposed to discuss some time ago. And if our American partners want this to happen, this is quite possible. But of course, this will require a serious discussion. Every word in such documents needs to be discussed. One of those documents also mentions strategic stability, which is an issue that must be discussed with our American partners too. Well, this is something that we have suggested since the Obama times. They said yes, yes, and then several months before Obama stepped down from the presidential office, this work stalled. Now the New START treaties running out. It will soon expire. And of course, there is a desire to go back to discussing these issues. Every such issue is a separate topic for discussion, for a serious one. And we're ready to discuss. Next week, the American delegation is planning to come to Moscow. Vesti FM. Who will be the main negotiators from the Russian side? And we also heard about talks in Abu Dhabi. Is it a parallel talks process? And who is talking with whom there? Could you please tell us more about that? Well, as to the Russian side, I think it's quite obvious. We'll be represented by a foreign ministry. And we will sit down and we'll have a substantive discussion with the foreign ministry and with Mr. Medinsky, presidential aide who has handled this situation from the start. And in order to organize this work properly, I also included Yuri Ushakov, who's in contact with American colleagues. Of course, he cannot do that on his own. He'll do that jointly with the presidential administration and with the foreign ministry, because there are many issues. There are many issues to have a conversation about and to put down to paper. And as to Abu Dhabi, I heard some noise about this. Nothing secret is happening over there. Our security services and Ukrainian security services too always had the contacts, even during the most hard times. And one of the issues that they have discussed is prisoner exchanges. And Abu Dhabi gave us a platform to do that. And we're very grateful to their leadership for providing this opportunity. It allowed us to bring back many hundreds of our guys, of our heroes. And at the initiative of the Ukrainian side, we really had a meeting about this. This meeting was held in Abu Dhabi. It included one of the leaders of the Russian Federal Security Service. And one of the representatives of the US administration also was in that meeting, which was a surprise for us. But this really happened, and the question was raised about whether we should expedite this process and have another meeting in Moscow this week. I only learned about this when the plane landed in Bishkek. But I said that we're ready to do that at any time that is convenient. We'll be will be there. We'll fly back Friday or on Saturday, whatever time they want. And we will determine who and when must come. And the United States administration will also determine who and when will come. And I also heard that President Trump made the decision, as we had agreed previously, to have a meeting in Moscow next week. And we're always ready for that. We're open for any such meeting. But who will be representing the United States is another issue, and it will be determined by the US President. But we'll be waiting for them early next week. Will you insist that the issue of territories in the Donbass must be resolved here and now, or are you willing to put it off until some later time? And if I may, a second question. Would you agree to go back to G7, to the G8, which is one of the possibilities in the peace plan? Would you be willing to go back to all of those people? Well, as to G7 or G8, we never asked to be there, but we were invited there, and it was a platform to coordinate our positions on some issues. But there is a thing. You may have noticed that even before the Ukrainian events, I stopped going there for some reason. So when the Ukrainian events started, they said that we're not welcome, and we had no problem with that. I think our Prime Minister went there once. Yes, I think it was in 2019. I think there was one time when I refused to go. We were shaping the government at that time. But on the whole, we had no official invitations to rejoin the association. And another thing is that we know how a great majority of the G7, I don't know why it's called the Big Seven, because in terms of population, territory, and the contribution to the GDP, they're growing smaller and smaller, but they're still important partners for us. So I don't really understand how exactly we will talk directly with them, given the current situation. Imagine we come there, and what will we do? Will we just look at each other, giving each other these sullen looks? I think we need a kind of a normalization, and if we realize all the proposals in the American plan, maybe we will have conditions for bilateral or multilateral contacts, but it's too early to speak about that. And I will just say a small thing that will make it clear. We still have proposals coming in about ceasing hostilities. But when the Ukrainian troops leave the areas that they're now occupying, then the hostilities will cease. And if they don't, we will make them leave using our firepower. Well, as to the military operation, is there still positive dynamics on the front, and which areas are the most active? We are maintaining positive dynamics in all the directions, and the rate of progress is increasing. Troops are advancing at an increasing rate. I don't want to give you any precise figures because I may not have them off the top of my head, but in all of the areas we have had improvements. Our army is moving forward faster. But the key problem for the enemy is that they have a growing gap between their losses and the number of soldiers that they can replace. I think they had 47.5 thousand lost in October, and they forcefully mobilized about 16.5 thousand, and about 14.5 thousand or 15,000 were brought back from the hospitals. But if we put all of that together, we have about 15,000 minus 15,000. And last month they had minus 10,000. So the gap is growing. And there are also people who desert. And desertion is a serious problem. It's not only what you hear from our media, it's also acknowledged by the Western media. And it's impossible to contain. So I don't think this situation can be helped for Ukraine. So we have positive trends in all the areas. Question from RT. Are you aware of the leaks or talks between Ushakov, Witkov, and Dmitriev? What can you say about this? It's an entire scandal that keeps growing in the Western media, seeing increased coverage, and there seems to be an attack on Witkov. Well, as to the leaks, as they say, it could be fake or it could be an eavesdropped conversation, which is a criminal, and to present a number of proposals on what can be done next. And one of the proposals I got is to have some joint conversations with the US, as I understand it, and we're willing to talk about strategic stability. Can this happen during the next week? Yes, we will certainly raise this question. Both the US and Russia understand it very clearly that preparing for nuclear tests takes time, and we cannot find ourselves in a situation when the United States test a weapon and we will have to prepare maybe for a year and a half till we can test our own weapons. So, as I said, we must be ready for any scenario, and we will be ready for any scenario. I propose that we conclude. All right. A question from Life. You don't have Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov with you on the strip. Are you missing him? Well, he hasn't been seen for about 2 weeks. The media say that he is now out of favor due to his unfortunate conversation with Rubio. Well, that's nonsense, obviously. He has his own schedule. He reported to me, and he has his own plan. He's now preparing for a meeting with the American partners. Yes, please. Mr. President, a question from TASS agency. Going back to the peace plan, there is the impression that the West is proposing new meetings to be held at the first opportunity. It seems that this is kind of pressure on Russia because these issues should not be resolved too quickly and with too much haste. Because if the solutions reached are not optimal, will there be ambiguous interpretations possible afterwards if the agreement is not drafted properly? Are there any other concerns like that? Well, I pointed out specifically that every issue on the list that was handed over to us will be discussed in great detail, because every one of those issues is a key one, and all of them require a very meticulous approach. So, apparently, our partners are understandably aiming to get this over with as quickly as possible. But what we see is, I will go back to this issue. But let's see the situation in the military operations zone. Krasnoarmeysk and Dmitrov are surrounded completely, just as Kupiansk was. 70% of Krasnoarmeysk is now held by Russian armed forces. The south part of the city of Dmitrov is where the Ukrainian army is isolated. They are dissipating throughout the city and are now being eliminated by our troops. And if you look at the map, if you look eastward, to the northeast from that region, we'll see the city of Komsomolsk. And to the north of Komsomolsk, you have Kupiansk, Slavyansk, and to the northeast you have Seversk. And Komsomolsk is now a place of intense fighting. And many of the buildings have already been cleared, and our troops are moving forward. As to Seversk, which is northeast, our troops have approached the city from the east, from the south, and from the north. And there's active fighting in the city. There are 8,000 buildings, and about 1,700 are currently controlled by us. As you see, the city is being surrounded by our troops, so the outcome is easy to guess. It's not very good news for the Ukrainian army. And if we look north, the city of Seversk, out of the 8,000 buildings that the city has, we have 1,700 controlled, and further north, the north group of forces has captured Volchansk, and almost completely. This is the Kharkov direction, and in the Zaporozhye region, what we see is the defenses that had been built up since 2014 by the enemy. And the Dnieper group of forces is now approaching it, and in some of the parts of that area, they are penetrating the defenses. Those are important elements. But what matters is the other thing, that the East group of forces has managed to break through the defenses and is moving very quickly. And to the northern part of the region, where the region borders the Dnieper region. And this means that we are close to Gulay-Polye, which is an important logistics hub. They're very close. And they will certainly move on after they pass that point, whether they capture it or not. And what this leads us to is that all this fortified area will be circumvent it. They will just bypass it through the north, and this may lead to a collapse of the Ukrainian front in that area. And this is what makes the difference between those who want to achieve a peace at any cost in the West, even if it means that Ukraine has to make concessions, and others. Because if what's happened in Kupiansk will also be happening in other parts of the front, then a collapse will be inevitable. And on November the 4th, the head of the Kiev regime said that in 5 to 7 days, they will have captured the city. Now that has not been the case. The Ukrainian troops have been eliminated and pushed out, and there is also a battalion that has been isolated. And our soldiers that some Ukrainian troops now look like homeless people, because there are 3,500 people in that area isolated with no proper supplies. They have to use copters to drop in food supplies. They're in a terrible condition. They have been for several weeks. So those in the West who understand what this is leading to, they insist that hostilities cease as soon as possible, even if that requires the Kyiv regime to make concessions, because they understand that as soon as the front collapses in those areas, the Ukrainian armed forces will lose combat readiness. They will lose the most capable units, like what's happening in Krasnoarmeysk. So they're telling them to preserve their fighting core and the statehood. They believe that's what they should be thinking about. And those who believe that Kupiansk has already been captured by Ukraine insist that the war continues until the last Ukrainian. That is how those approaches are different. Those who attack Mr. Witkov are those who hold these views, those who want to be part of this affair, perhaps because they have money ties with the Ukrainian establishment, and they have no scruples about fighting to the last Ukrainians.
Если вернуться, опять же, к мирным планам, есть мирный план Трампа, есть альтернативный план Европы, а есть ли понимание, с кем говорить, договариваться и подписывать итоговые документы со стороны политического руководства Украины?
Who will sign the documents from the Ukrainian side? Well, it will be pointless to sign. The Ukrainian leadership made a strategic mistake when they said that they would hold elections. And the president, they said that they would refuse to hold elections, and the president lost his legitimacy. Russia also in a state of military conflict with Ukraine, but we had presidential elections, and recently we also had municipal elections. Other elections, but they don't seem to be willing to do that, because as soon as a peace treaty is signed, as soon as the war stops, they will have to lift martial law. And if martial law is lifted, they will have to announce elections immediately. And under the current conditions, the existing Ukrainian leadership will not be able to win without cheating. But as Stalin said, it doesn't really matter who thinks what. Elections could be fixed, but they will have to have a referendum.
а потом референдум должен быть подтвержден Конституционным судом. А что происходит с Конституционным
The referendum will have to be endorsed by the Constitutional Court.
когда от него политическое руководство от Конституционного
And
суда требует
when the political leadership
президента?
are required that the Constitutional Court
Вы знаете, он уклонился от ответа.
confirm the powers of the President, the Constitutional Court refused to do that. Because according to the Constitution, the term is 5 years, not more. It cannot be extended. Of course, there are some legal technicalities, but it cannot be extended, even if you declare martial law. Only the Parliament has such powers. The President has no right to do that.
Подтверждение Конституционного суда. Но когда от Конституционного суда
So you have
чтобы
to have
он полномочия,
a decision by the Constitutional Court. But the Constitutional Court refused to do that. And when the Constitutional Court refused, I think I've already mentioned that, but it's truly laughable.
он пришел на работу,
The security service refused to let the judges
в конце концов убежал за границу.
into the office.
Конституционный суд не
So
работает.
the judge
Председатель Верховного суда в тюрьме сидит за коррупцию.
had to emigrate.
Те, кто занимаются коррупцией, самые главные коррупционеры, председателя
Also have
суда
the judges sitting in a jail. That the
за это
chief judge of the Constitutional Court is now in jail due to corruption.
истекли. Нужно избирать
And the term of office, those who are in the Constitutional Court, has already run out. We have to elect new members.
референдум надо провести.
It's also a problem.
Конституционный суд,
You have to have presidential elections. You have to have a referendum. You have to
поэтому нам по большому счету
elect members of the Constitutional Court. It's a procedure. It's an entire procedure. So we certainly have to talk with Ukraine, but it's legally impossible right now
может, кто хочет, тот пускай ведет переговоры.
to have
Нам нужно, чтобы это
a meaningful
наше решение
outcome.
международно признано.
We just need our results to be recognized by the key international players.
И это имеет значение.
The results must be recognized internationally, and that is important. Because it's one thing
Определенные территории
to have
под российским
a
суверенитетом
solution recognized
нарушение
and to have some parts under Russian sovereignty, and if the agreements are breached, it will be deemed an attack on the Russian Federation with all the consequences and the right to response, or it will be seen as an attempt to get back
нам, конечно,
what is truly Ukrainian.
признание, но не от
So we certainly need recognition, but not from Ukraine at the time. We hope that there will be a time when we'll be able to talk with Ukraine.
хотят выстроить отношения с Россией.
There are people who are
Достаточно много.
clear-minded and who want to build good relations with Russia in the long term.
Давайте заключительно.
Здравствуйте, меня зовут Кира Латухина, «Российская газета». Скажите,
Question from Российская
вы
газета.
написали, что завтра в Москву прилетит Виктор Орбан, венгерский премьер-министр, для
Tomorrow, it was reported that Viktor Orban would arrive to Moscow and for talks. Can you confirm that this will truly take place, and what will be the intention? We do have contacts with Hungary regarding a potential meeting, and we're always happy to see any of our partners in Russia, even despite the aggressive actions of the European colleagues. We would still be happy to see them too. But Viktor Orban is a person whose position is well known. It's quite unbiased, I believe, and he's one of the people who see the realities on the ground and who shape their political position in accordance with the real situation. We have great cooperation in energy, not to speak about the Apache nuclear power plant, and there are things to be discussed additionally that require additional discussions. I'm talking about the fuel for the MPPs. In Ukraine, for example, they used American fuel, but they had some trouble with that. They had near security breach situations. So all of this has to be discussed. And there are many bilateral topics on the agenda. And if Viktor Orban wants to come, we're always ready to do that. I think you already asked a question. Do you have no shame? Allow your colleague. Komsomolskaya Pravda. No, you've already answered part of this question, and why you're asking it. Well, if the Crimea and the Donbass are not recognized de jure, how can they be recognized de facto, not de jure? Well, this will be something to discuss with the United States. Thank you for noticing it in the plan. It's one of the key issues, really. Now, thank you.